In the stillness of the early evening, I found solace in the isolation my rustic home offered. Nestled amidst the whispering woods, it was a haven from the chaos of the world. I had come here seeking peace, a place where the only interruptions were the rustle of leaves and the distant calls of wildlife. This secluded retreat had become my sanctuary, a place where I could lose myself in writing and reflection. The woods surrounding my home held an eerie beauty. The towering trees swayed gently in the wind, their branches casting elongated shadows that danced across the ground. The air was cool and damp, carrying the earthy scent of fallen leaves and rich soil. It was a place that demanded respect and caution, a reminder that nature was both majestic and untamed. My thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. It was a sound I hadn't expected, one that jarred the tranquility I'd come to cherish. Opening the door, I was surprised to find Elise, my daughter, standing there. Her presence was a mix of relief and uncertainty. Our relationship was strained, marked by years of silence and misunderstandings. "Hello, Dad," she said, her voice a blend of hesitation and hope. "Elise," I replied, stepping aside to let her in, unsure of what her arrival might bring to the life I had carefully constructed. Elise's unexpected arrival brought a whirlwind of emotions. We spent the evening catching up, our conversation punctuated by awkward silences and tentative smiles. As night descended, the air grew heavy with the tension of unspoken words and unresolved conflicts. It was clear we had a long way to go, bridging the gap that had widened over the years. Just as we were finding our footing, a strange noise echoed through the house. It was a sound unfamiliar to me, a rustling outside, followed by a sharp crack. My heart raced as I moved to the window, peering into the darkness. The woods, usually a source of comfort, now felt menacing, shadows stretching ominously, concealing unseen threats. "I think someone's out there," I whispered to Elise, trying to keep my voice steady. We debated calling for help, each passing moment heightening our anxiety. Before we could act, the door burst open, and a group of strangers flooded into the room. They were led by a man with fierce eyes and a determined stance, Liam, as I would come to know him. Their accusations were sharp and immediate, branding me a villain of environmental destruction. Confusion and fear coursed through me as I faced their wrath. Elise stood by my side, her expression a mix of disbelief and defiance. We were caught in a nightmare, our world upended by the uninvited guests who now filled our home. The air in the room was tense, charged with the energy of confrontation. Liam's accusations hung heavy. They were relentless in their conviction that I was a corporate monster hiding behind a facade of seclusion. As their leader, Liam spoke with the fervor of someone convinced of his righteousness, determined to expose what he believed was my hidden agenda. "You're the one responsible for the destruction around here," he spat, eyes burning with conviction. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself amidst the chaos. "I think you've got the wrong man," I replied, attempting to reason with them. "I'm not who you think I am." As the activists pressed their case, fragments of my past began to surface, memories I had buried deep, afraid to confront them. Years ago, I had been a different person, involved in a company that promised progress but left behind a trail of environmental ruin. Disillusioned and guilt-ridden, I had retreated to this remote corner of the world, hoping to atone for my mistakes in solitude. Elise listened intently, absorbing revelations that painted a different picture of her father, one she hadn't anticipated. Her presence here was an unexpected challenge, an opportunity for honesty and connection amidst the turmoil. Her gaze met mine, searching for truth. Liam, undeterred, shared his own story of loss and betrayal, convinced that I was the man who had wronged him and others. The room was thick with tension, past and present colliding in a cacophony of misunderstandings and misjudgments. As the night wore on, I realized this confrontation was more than just about me. It was about everyone facing their ghosts and finding a way forward, beyond the echoing accusations of the past. The room seemed to shrink under the weight of Liam's words, his anger palpable. The activists surrounded us, their faces a mix of determination and doubt. The air was electric, charged with a volatile mix of fear and righteous indignation. My heart pounded in my chest, a constant reminder of the precariousness of our situation. As the confrontation reached its peak, a sudden physical struggle broke out. Liam lunged forward, driven by frustration and a desperate need for validation. The activists joined in, a chaotic tangle of arms and voices, their accusations swirling around us like a tempest. In that moment, I realized we were at a breaking point, one that demanded action. Elise and I exchanged a glance, a silent agreement forming between us. Despite the chaos, we had to find a way to communicate with these intruders, to reach beyond the veil of anger and misinformation. With a surge of determination, I stepped forward, raising my voice above the clamor. "Stop!" I shouted, the word reverberating through the room. "Listen to me!" Surprisingly, the command worked. The room fell silent, the activists pausing to listen. Elise took this opportunity to confront Liam directly, challenging his assumptions and questioning the validity of his information. Her words were sharp, cutting through the fog of misconceptions. The confrontation forced me to confront truths I had long avoided, my role in past environmental harm and the guilt that had driven me into hiding. As I revealed these secrets, Elise's eyes widened, a mix of understanding and disappointment. Yet, amidst the turmoil, we found a sliver of common ground. The chapter ended with a revelation, a power shift that altered the dynamics of the confrontation, setting the stage for resolution. Tensions remained high, but a glimmer of understanding began to emerge from the shadows. As the tension in the room ebbed, I felt the weight of years pressing down on me. My life had been one of retreat, but now, faced with the impassioned accusations of Liam and his group, I was forced to confront the legacy of my past actions. The room was quiet, the activists watching, waiting for me to explain myself. I took a deep breath and began to speak, my voice steady. The truth is, I once worked for a company that promised innovation, but left devastation in its wake. I left because I couldn't live with what we'd done. This land, this house, they were supposed to be my redemption, a way to atone for the past. Elise stood beside me, her presence a source of unexpected strength. She turned to Liam and his followers, her voice firm yet empathetic. "My father isn't the enemy. He's made mistakes, but he came here to make things right. If you want to help the environment, you need to target the real culprits." Her words resonated, and I saw doubt flicker in the eyes of the activists. The confrontation had shifted from one of blind aggression to potential understanding. Liam's own motivations came under scrutiny as the group began to question his intentions. Amidst this, I offered to share the knowledge and resources I had gathered in my quest for redemption, a gesture that signaled my willingness to help the activists address the broader issues they were fighting against. This act of transparency began to dismantle the walls of mistrust that had built up between us. As dawn broke, the echoes of silence were replaced by a tentative dialogue, a path toward reconciliation. It was a new beginning, one where the truth had the power to heal rather than harm. The activists departed as the sun rose, their anger tempered by the truth they had uncovered. The shadows that had loomed so ominously over my home seemed to recede, replaced by the light of a new understanding. Elise and I stood together on the porch, watching as the group disappeared into the woods, leaving behind the echoes of their presence. Elise turned to me, her expression thoughtful. "What will you do now?" she asked, her voice filled with curiosity and a hint of hope. "I think it's time I stopped hiding," I replied, the realization settling over me like a warm blanket. There are still things I can do, ways to make amends for the past. The decision to share my story with the world, to advocate for the very environment I had once harmed, was daunting yet invigorating. It was a step toward healing, both for the land and for the fractured bond between Elise and me. Our conversation shifted to the future, the possibility of Elise staying to help with the work ahead. Together, we could create a narrative of change and responsibility, one that acknowledged past mistakes while looking toward a brighter future. As we talked, a sense of calm settled over the house. The woods no longer felt threatening. Instead, they whispered promises of renewal and growth. The journey ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in years, I felt ready to face it. In the quiet moments that followed, I realized that silence was no longer my enemy. It was a canvas upon which I could paint a new story, one of redemption, understanding, and the enduring bond between a father and his daughter. When the letter arrived, its weight felt more than just paper and ink. It was the burden of a legacy I neither asked for nor understood. Standing at the gates of the family estate, I felt the chill of the ocean breeze cutting through the air. This place had always loomed large in family stories, a monument to our past. Yet, as I stepped inside, it felt more like a prison, filled with echoes of lives once lived. Eleanor, the family lawyer, greeted me with a nod and a glance that seemed to see right through me. "Welcome, Olivia," she said. "This is your new beginning, though I'm sure it feels like the end of something else." Her words carried a hint of mystery that made me uneasy. The house was just as I remembered, vast, with its dimly lit corridors and rooms that seemed to hold their breath. As I wandered through the hallways, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, though only shadows danced in the corners of my eyes. It was a place steeped in history and secrets, each room a chapter waiting to be read. Eleanor handed me a stack of documents. "You'll need to review these. They contain everything about the estate, including your rights as the heir." Her eyes lingered on mine for a moment, as if testing my resolve. The estate's walls seemed to close in around me, whispering promises and threats alike. The morning light did little to dispel the shadows that clung to the estate. With a cup of lukewarm coffee in hand, I sat at the old oak desk, sorting through the documents Eleanor had given me. Among them, I found letters from my ancestors, their words thick with tension and veiled threats. They spoke of rivalries and betrayals that painted a different picture of my family's history. As I delved deeper, I uncovered cryptic notes, references to hidden rooms and secret compartments within the estate. My curiosity piqued. I began a search through the house, guided by the faint echoes of past generations. Memories of my childhood here were hazy, filled with glimpses of laughter and whispered warnings. My relationship with my family had always been distant, a mosaic of incomplete pieces. The estate, it seemed, held the key to understanding the stories I had been told. It was in the library, amidst the dust and fading light, that I found the first clue, a loose floorboard leading to a hidden compartment. Inside was a journal, its pages brittle and yellowed with age. As I read, the truth began to unfold, revealing a web of deceit and ambition that spanned decades. The air felt heavy with the weight of secrets that now rested on my shoulders. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of what the estate had in store for me. I had barely begun to digest the revelations in the journal when the doorbell rang, echoing ominously through the halls. The sight of Richard standing on the doorstep sent a shiver down my spine. His presence was as unwelcome as the storm clouds gathering outside, a harbinger of trouble. "Olivia," he said, his voice smooth yet laced with a hint of menace, "I thought it was time we talked about the estate." He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his eyes scanning the room with a proprietary air. I led him to the drawing room, my mind racing with the implications of his visit. Richard had always been the black sheep of the family, his ambitions often clashing with those of my parents. I knew he had come to stake his claim, but what concerned me more were the lengths he would go to achieve it. "You're aware," he began, settling into an armchair as if he owned it, "that there's more to this estate than just bricks and mortar. There are documents, secrets, that could change everything." I met his gaze, refusing to let him see my unease. "I'm aware of the estate's significance, Richard, but the law is clear. I'm the rightful heir." Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Legalities can be flexible. There are ways to uncover the truth, ways that might not be in your favor." The tension crackled between us, a silent battle of wills. He left soon after, leaving a promise of conflict lingering in the air. As the door closed behind him, I knew this was just the beginning. His visit had awakened something dark within these walls, a challenge I was now forced to confront. Richard's visit left a sense of unease that I couldn't shake. Determined to uncover the truth before he could exploit it, I set to work exploring the estate's hidden recesses. The journal I found earlier hinted at secret passages and concealed rooms, relics of a bygone era when my ancestors had much to hide. Armed with a flashlight and a sense of purpose, I began my search in the library, where the air was thick with the scent of old books and dust. The journal had mentioned a hidden passage behind the shelves, a place where family secrets had been stored away from prying eyes. After hours of searching, my persistence paid off. Behind a row of dusty tomes, I found a lever disguised as part of the bookshelf. With a click and a groan, the shelf swung open to reveal a narrow passage leading into darkness. The corridor was cold and damp, lined with stone walls that seemed to close in on me. I could feel the weight of the estate above, its history pressing down with every step. At the end of the passage, I discovered a room filled with relics, old photographs, letters, and documents that whispered of alliances and betrayals long past. As I sifted through the artifacts, I found a letter addressed to my grandfather. It spoke of a pact between him and Richard's father, a secret agreement that could change everything. With this new knowledge, I realized the true depth of the deception and the danger it posed. The estate was not just my inheritance, it was a battleground for a war that had raged for generations. The estate felt different in the days following my discovery of the secret room. It was as though the walls themselves had absorbed the tension, amplifying every creak and whisper. Richard's intentions were clear. He wanted the estate, and he wasn't above using underhanded tactics to get it. Rumors spread among the family about Richard's claims, and I began to feel the pressure mounting. Cousins and distant relatives who had been silent for years suddenly emerged, each with their own opinions and advice. It was as if the estate's shadows had come to life, casting doubt on everything I thought I knew. Eleanor, the family lawyer, called for a meeting to discuss the situation. Her calm demeanor did little to soothe my nerves as she laid out the legalities and potential implications of Richard's claims. "It's important to stay vigilant, Olivia," she advised. "Richard is known for his manipulative tactics." But even as she spoke, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her involvement. Eleanor had been the gatekeeper of our family's secrets for years, and I wondered whose side she was truly on. I returned to the hidden room, hoping to uncover more clues to fortify my position. As I pieced together the fragments of the past, a new picture began to emerge, one of alliances and betrayals that had shaped our family's legacy. It was a web of deceit, and I was determined to unravel it before Richard could ensnare me in its threads. The confrontation with Richard loomed closer, and the estate felt more oppressive with each passing day. The knowledge of the pact between our fathers weighed heavily on my mind, a dark secret threatening to consume me. The estate had become a battlefield, every room a potential trap, every shadow a possible threat. As the storm outside intensified, so did the tension within the estate. Richard's manipulations had sown seeds of doubt among the family, and I knew I couldn't rely on anyone but myself. It was time to confront him and put an end to this once and for all. The ancestral hall, with its grand portraits and echoing acoustics, seemed the perfect setting for our confrontation. Richard stood before me, his expression a mixture of arrogance and anticipation. "You've uncovered some interesting truths, haven't you, Olivia?" he said, his voice dripping with insincerity. "You think these secrets will help you claim the estate?" I replied, meeting his gaze with all the defiance I could muster. "This isn't just about legalities, Richard, it's about what's right." Richard laughed, a hollow sound that reverberated through the hall. "Right and wrong are just perspectives, my dear. What matters is who holds the power." Our words were weapons, each strike calculated to weaken the other's resolve. As the argument reached its peak, I realized the fight wasn't just for the estate, it was for my identity and the legacy I was destined to uphold. The breaking point was here, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. The tension in the ancestral hall was palpable as Richard and I faced off, both determined to claim the legacy we believed was ours. I had anticipated this moment, prepared to fight with everything I had. Yet, as our confrontation escalated, a revelation struck me like a bolt of lightning. It was Eleanor who provided the missing piece, stepping forward with an expression of grim determination. "It's time the truth came to light," she announced, holding a document that looked as old as the estate itself. The document was a contract between our grandfathers, outlining the terms of an agreement they had kept hidden from the rest of the family. It detailed a shared investment in the estate's future, a pact meant to ensure its preservation regardless of personal rivalry. My heart raced as I realized the implications. Richard's claims were not without merit, but neither were mine. As the truth unfolded, the air seemed to shift. The estate, with all its secrets and shadows, had been a pawn in a game of power that spanned generations. It was time to end this cycle and build a legacy rooted in truth. Richard's expression softened, his arrogance giving way to understanding. "It seems we both have a claim, Olivia," he admitted, his voice tinged with regret. The storm outside began to subside as the truth settled between us, leaving a calm in its wake. Richard and I stood together, heirs not just to an estate, but to a complicated family history that had shaped us both. We agreed to honor the pact our ancestors had made, combining our efforts to preserve the estate and its legacy. It was not an easy decision. Our relationship was fraught with distrust and rivalry. Yet, the revelation of our shared history created a foundation for understanding and collaboration. The family gathered in the ancestral hall, the portraits of our forebears watching over us as we shared our decision. Eleanor's role as the keeper of secrets had come full circle, and she offered her support in guiding us through the challenges ahead. The estate, once a battleground, now felt like a haven. The shadows that had haunted its halls began to lift, replaced by a sense of purpose and renewal. I knew the journey was far from over, but the path forward was clearer than it had ever been. As I looked around at my family, I realized that our legacy was not just about the past, but about the future we would build together. And for the first time, I felt truly at home within these walls. The clock ticked softly in the corner of my room, each second echoing through the silence of the night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to ignore the unease that had settled in the pit of my stomach. It was just another restless night, or so I thought, until the sound of shattering glass jolted me upright. Heart pounding, I strained to listen. The crash seemed to come from the living room. I slipped out of bed, my feet cold against the hardwood floor, and grabbed the nearest object I could find, a heavy ceramic lamp. The shadows stretched and danced as I made my way down the hallway, every creak of the floorboards magnified in the stillness. Reaching the living room, I flicked on the light, and my breath caught in my throat. A man stood by the broken window. He was disheveled and wide-eyed, as if he had stepped out of a nightmare. Instinct screamed at me to call for help, but something about his haunted expression held me back. "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to steady my voice. He flinched at the sound of my voice, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for something only he could see. I didn't mean to," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought it was safe." Safe? My mind raced with questions. Why was he here? What did he want? I tightened my grip on the lamp, ready to defend myself if necessary. But instead of charging, the stranger sank to the floor, clutching his head in his hands. In that moment, fear mingled with curiosity, and I found myself hesitating, caught between the instinct to run and the inexplicable urge to understand this mysterious intruder. The room was silent except for the sound of our breathing, a strange, heavy rhythm that filled the space between us. I watched as the man, still huddled on the floor, took slow, measured breaths, as if trying to calm the storm raging inside him. "Who are you?" I repeated, softer this time, trying to reach through the fog of fear that surrounded us both. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine for the first time. "Jack," he said. "My name's Jack. I didn't mean to scare you. I was just looking for somewhere to be safe." Safe. That word again. It was odd, hearing it from someone who had just shattered the illusion of safety in my home. But as I looked at him, I saw the desperation etched into his features, a deep-rooted fear that seemed to mirror my own. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice steady despite the uncertainty clawing at my insides. Jack hesitated, as if weighing his words carefully. I'm not well," he admitted. "Things get confused sometimes. I don't always know what's real." His confession sent a shiver down my spine, and yet there was something in his tone that kept me rooted to the spot. I lowered the lamp slightly, sensing that he wasn't a threat, at least not intentionally. "You need help," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. Jack nodded, his expression one of weary acceptance. "I know," he replied. "But it's hard to ask for it when you're stuck in your own head." A strange bond formed between us in that moment, a connection built on shared vulnerability. I knew I should call someone, call for help, do something, but instead, I found myself wanting to understand more about this man who had stumbled into my life, into my home, bringing with him a whirlwind of chaos and questions. The air in the room felt thick, as if time itself had slowed, leaving only Jack and me in this strange limbo. As the minutes passed, Jack's posture relaxed slightly, though the tension still clung to him like a shadow. I offered him a glass of water, a small gesture that seemed to bring a flicker of calm to his stormy eyes. He took a sip and began to speak, his voice a fragile thread connecting the fragments of his past. "I was in the army," he said, staring into the depths of the glass as if searching for answers. "Did a couple of tours. It messes with your head, you know?" Sometimes it's like I'm back there, even when I'm here." I nodded, encouraging him to continue. His words painted vivid images of chaos and conflict, of a world far removed from the quiet of my living room. Yet, it was clear that the battlefield had never truly left him. It had followed him home, lingering in the corners of his mind, waiting to strike. "Is that why you came here?" I asked gently, trying to piece together the puzzle of his presence in my home. He looked at me with a mixture of relief and anguish. "I don't know why I picked your place," he admitted. "I just needed somewhere to feel normal, even if just for a minute. But nothing feels right anymore." As he spoke, I realized that Jack wasn't just an intruder. He was a man adrift, searching for something he couldn't name. The chaos he brought into my life mirrored the turmoil within him, and in that reflection, I saw a part of myself I had long ignored, the part that craved understanding and connection. As Jack shared his story, I found myself recalling moments from my own past, the arguments with my family, the silence that followed when I moved away. I had chosen solitude, believing it was safer, but here was Jack, a living testament to the isolation I had built around myself. "I know it sounds crazy," Jack said, pulling me back to the present. "But sometimes I feel like I'm still fighting. Like I never left." His words resonated with a truth I hadn't expected. "Maybe we're all fighting something," I replied, surprising myself with the admission. The walls I had carefully constructed seemed to waver, as if Jack's presence had loosened the foundations. Jack offered a small, rueful smile. "You got a good place here," he said, glancing around the room. "It's peaceful. I'm sorry for breaking it." I shook my head, the gesture feeling more symbolic than anything. "Maybe it needed breaking," I said, the weight of my own words settling over me. In that moment, I made a decision. I couldn't turn Jack away, not without first trying to help him. I had the resources, the connections to get him the support he needed. But more than that, I felt a pull, a need to reach out beyond the walls of my own solitude. "Let me help you," I said, the words feeling like a promise. "There are people you can talk to, people who can help you find your way back." Jack hesitated, doubt flickering in his eyes, but slowly he nodded. It was a small victory, but in the war he was fighting, every victory counted. As the night stretched on, I realized that this unexpected encounter was more than a disruption. It was a chance to rebuild, to heal both Jack's wounds and my own. As dawn approached, I could feel the weight of the night pressing down on us both. The living room, once a sanctuary, had become a theater for Jack's unfolding drama, a place where shadows seemed to whisper secrets from his past. Jack's eyes flickered with a mixture of exhaustion and unease. He had been sharing fragments of his experiences, memories tangled with fear, moments that refused to let go. His words were punctuated by silences, as if he were searching for something in the void. "There's something I haven't told you," Jack said finally, his voice low and rough. "I lost someone over there. A friend. We were on patrol, and it was my call. I thought it was safe." The confession hung in the air like a ghost, echoing with the guilt that had followed him home. It was a revelation that twisted my understanding of his pain, deepening the chasm between what he had endured and what I could comprehend. "I'm sorry," I said, the inadequacy of my words evident even to me. But Jack nodded, accepting them for what they were, an acknowledgement of his burden. As the light filtered through the curtains, I realized that this was the turning point, a moment where the past and present collided, forcing us both to confront the truth. Jack's guilt was a specter that had haunted him for too long, and now, faced with its weight, he stood on the brink of something that felt like liberation. Together, we sat in silence, two strangers bound by a shared moment of vulnerability. And in that quiet, I felt a shift, a realization that the only way forward was through the darkness that had brought us together. The morning light brought a clarity I hadn't anticipated. Jack was no longer the intruder who had shattered my peace. He was a man seeking redemption, a soul in search of release. His presence had forced me to reevaluate my own choices, the barriers I had built, and the loneliness I had mistaken for independence. "Thank you," Jack said, his voice raw with emotion. "For listening. For not turning me away." I nodded, understanding the courage it took for him to speak those words. "We all need someone to listen," I replied, realizing that I, too, had found something I hadn't known I was missing. With a renewed sense of purpose, I reached out to contacts who could help Jack, veterans groups, counselors specializing in PTSD. As I made the calls, Jack watched with a tentative hope that had been absent before. "There's a place I can take you," I said, offering him a lifeline. "People who understand what you're going through, who can help you find your way back." He hesitated, a wariness in his eyes, but slowly he nodded. "I think I'm ready," he said, his voice steadier now. It was a simple statement, yet it carried the weight of a decision made after years of turmoil. As Jack prepared to leave, we stood together by the door, the morning sun casting long shadows across the floor. "You'll be okay," I said, both a statement and a hope. Jack gave a small, grateful smile. "And so will you." With that, he stepped into the light, leaving behind the shadows that had defined him for so long. And as the door closed, I felt a sense of closure, not just for Jack, but for myself. The intrusion that had once seemed like a nightmare had become a catalyst for change, a reminder that sometimes it takes the unexpected to bring us back to life. The apartment felt different now, lighter, as if the tension that had clung to its walls had finally dissipated. I stood by the window, watching as Jack made his way down the street, a solitary figure moving toward a future that was no longer clouded by shadows. I had spent so long believing that solitude was my strength, that the walls I had built around myself were necessary. But Jack's presence had shown me otherwise. He had broken through my defenses, forcing me to confront the isolation I had so carefully constructed. In helping him, I had also begun to heal myself. As the first rays of sunlight kissed the horizon, I reflected on the journey we had shared. Jack had come into my life unexpectedly, an intruder who had left an indelible mark. His story had opened my eyes to the power of connection, the importance of reaching out, even when it seemed easier to retreat. With Jack gone, the silence in the apartment felt different, no longer oppressive, but full of possibilities. I considered the estranged relationships in my life, the bridges I had left unbuilt. Perhaps it was time to reach out, to mend the connections I had allowed to wither. As the sun rose higher, casting warm light across the room, I made a silent promise to myself, to let go of fear, to embrace vulnerability, and to open my heart to the world beyond my walls. Jack's journey had ended, but mine was just beginning, a new dawn, a new chapter, and a renewed hope for what lay ahead. Like the story? Hit like and subscribe. See you in the next story popping up on your screen at this exact moment.